part of Professional Days, established a few years ago to provide our senior faculty who were retiring to provide their last lecture, share their humor, their wisdom with us. So I see last year's last lecture, we had President Emeritus Ed Yaw is here. Also acknowledge President Tony Iacono is here. And I see Paterson is here, and am I missing others? Recent retirees and retirees. So, well, thank you for coming. I saw Sandy come down, and I said, "Is this your Thomas Wolfe look?" He said it was. So, anyway, I think all of us know what Sandy has meant to this institution over 43 years. He is Professor Emeritus, by the way, the board. Let's give a round of applause. Officially designated at commencement, and in the proclamation, just the awards he received, his contributions to the college, establishing New Jersey Poets, being an NEH Fellow at Princeton, being Poet Laureate for the Archdiocese of Newark. I think being a mentor to many faculty as well as students throughout his career. Several years ago, he did apply for the Carnegie Faculty of the Year Award, and it was interesting, although he didn't get it, although he should have. There were the testimonies he received from the students really indicated the power he had in the classroom and his effectiveness as a faculty member. So we're very privileged to have him here, so I'm pleased to introduce this year's last lecturer, Professor Sander Zulauf.
Thank you. I don't know. Thank you, Dwight, and thank you to our new president, Dr. Tony Iacono, and to Bruce Dutra, our Dean of Liberal Arts, and Keith Smith, our former dean, and to Betty Simmons and Ed Yaw. Thank you all for your leadership and grace. My career at CCM has bookends. My son was born on Thanksgiving Day in 1973. The first semester I taught here, that whole fall was about oil shock, the Nixon-Watergate crisis, and the firing of the special prosecutor and the attorney general, known as the Saturday Night Massacre. After my last semester, my stepson Michael died from injuries he received in a car crash, and his baby is due in August. Birth of a son at the beginning, death of a stepson at the end, and a new grandchild and a new beginning. And to make it complete, we now have Trumpgate, the firing of the FBI director for investigating Russian involvement in our 2016 election. My memories this morning fall between those two bookends. I'm honored to have the chance to share them with you, and of course, I'll end with two poems. Teaching English here for all these years has been a hard-working delight. My English department colleagues have been wonderful to work with. Smart, sharp, witty, terrifically supportive of each other. And I consider them all my friends. The consistency of leadership provided by Dr. Janet Eber through all the seasons of campus life, from those brutal icy winds on the mountain and the snows of winter to the astonishing cherry blossoms of spring, marking the close of another academic year. She has always been there for all of us. And our two beautiful executive assistants, Sharon Yeager and Caitlin Roach, both have the unique ability to hand you what you need or answer your question before you ask them for whatever it is. Whose book is Debbie's? Whose office? Debbie's. Whose glasses are Debbie's? Where's in the writing center? On my very first day of that semester, I was one of 6 new hires appointed to teach English. Pete Williams was introduced by Gene Hanley to our group as Dr. J. Peter Williams. He's our only one, he said, so be nice to him. Angela Marcapoto, Michael Gessel, Sandra Lee Jackson, and Alex Kuzma were all at our orientation meeting. After it was over and we went upstairs to explore our new offices in the then brand new B building, now Cowan Hall. How clever, A, B, and C. Alex came up to me and asked me, "Do you think creative writing can be taught?" I said to him, "Can anything?" He's now teaching my creative writing class. In my second year of teaching creative writing, at night, my 17 students, nearly all of them adults, begged me to let them turn in the next week's assignment anonymously. They claimed without their names on their stories and poems, they would be much less inhibited and could write more freely. So I went along with it. And in the next class, I ended up with 17 works of anonymous original pornography. As the years flew on into one another, we were at the mercy of a legion of department secretaries, all with their quirks and enemies, their joys and angers. Doris Davis stood 4 feet 10 in high heels, and her husband was nearly 7 feet tall. Pat Wall, Nancy St. John, Stephanie Eagles, the moral center of the universe, our British import Liz Quigley, who thought all of us had twists in our knickers, Dottie Foote, Bunny Stetz. You can guess my favorite message to her every year. Happy Easter, Bunny. And the wonderful Sharon Yeager, who to this day enjoys telling me to put my big boy pants on and deal with it. And whenever she sensed I needed encouragement, this former Staten Island cheerleader would break out in, "Sandy, Sandy, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. Go, Sandy. Go, Sandy. Go, Sandy." And dear Caitlin, living the dream Roach, who makes Radar O'Reilly look incompetent. But there was a time when our end of the office was shared with the Basic Studies Department, so we had 3 secretaries on the floor. Betty Wagner was Walter Schlemuski's secretary. Her favorite expression in her booming, deep smoker's voice was, "Lord love a duck." One unforgettable Valentine's Day, I heard that voice right outside my office door inquiring, "It's Valentine's Day, Mr. C. Do you have your heart on?" The first year here, I began organizing poetry readings and bringing the top American poets to the campus by obtaining funds by walking around the campus to each office that might have money and begging. Then, with the formation of the Cultural Affairs Committee, marvelous things began to happen, including the Bicentennial Poetry Series. From February to September 1976, featuring X.J. Kennedy, Lynn Lifshin, Ishmael Reed, Stephen Dobbins, McKeel McBride, Paul Zimmer, and finally, James Wright. And I was just informed by the authorized biographer that now, after almost 40 years after his death, his biography will finally be published by Farrar Straus on October 17th. The next year, committee artist Tony Lordi brought the sculptor Tal Streeter to CCM, and he created what is known in art history reference books as the massive outdoor sculpture. He wandered the campus with surveyor's equipment, and suddenly we had that prominent red vertical beam, and hidden for most of the year in the woods is the other half of the work, a red horizontal beam supported by two blue vertical beams. He did this asking only for the cost of materials. It is historic, for Streeter has exhibited at the Met in New York City, at Storm King, and his installations are all over the country. It is probably the most valuable work of art the college will ever own. It was immediately controversial. It made people angry, which is always the sign of great art, isn't it? One day I noticed that plant and maintenance people had dumped truckloads of dirt all around it. I was crushed. Yet it cost less than a campus security station wagon. Our entire committee was invited to join Dr. Maston in the Board of Trustees room off of his office. He sat us down and told us our committee had been disbanded. I naively asked, "How can you do that?" There was an audible gasp in the room, and Sherm gave me one of his famous icy stares. After a few moments, I said, "Oh, now I see." I had a Comp 1 student who was curious about the sculpture, and she wrote a letter to Tal Streeter. Here is a part of his answer to her, a 2-page single-spaced letter dated December 8th, 1992. I'll tell you a little bit more about CCM's Louise's Red Cross. Louise Thompson was a highly respected Millbrook, New York personality, but someone I knew only from local newspaper accounts. In her 80s, she wrote beautifully about our area's local history, reminiscing on her childhood memories. She was confined to a bed, living in a local nursing home. At 18, the doctors told her that rheumatoid arthritis would freeze all her joints. She had a choice of being in a seated position or lying down. She chose lying down. So she had been in that bed, unable to move, virtually all her life. The picture of Louise, which appeared in the local newspaper, was that of a beautiful 18-year-old wearing an old-fashioned black one-piece bathing suit, a large red cross emblazoned on the suit. She died 3 years ago. Unfortunately, I never told her about the sculpture. I guess I wondered if she would find it difficult to understand the aesthetics, the idea of such a large, strange, seemingly impersonal image, somehow or other inspired and dedicated to the memory of her as a young person, and later, the strength of her spirit, the fate which would befall such a guileless soul. I will always regret not having gone to meet her and tell her about this sculpture. This is still part of the letter, your Louise's Red Cross meant a great deal to me. I was immensely proud of it then. I'm still proud of it. I can now appreciate even more fully the college administrators, faculty, and staff who believed in me and my concept. The letter goes on for another page and a half, explaining the complexity of the engineering that went into it and the aesthetics and geometry and relativity behind all the extraordinary thinking that created this masterpiece. I am humbled when I read this letter again after all these years. To me, this work is a perfection for CCM, symbolic of the enormous life decisions we all must make and how college is the place for students to learn to make those decisions. Around that time, there was a contest to rename the student newspaper. Nobody understood Youngtown Edition and thought it was a stigma on the maturity of the student body. Nobody understood it is named for the mountain this college occupies. History professor Hank Citron entered the contest. He suggested renaming the paper the Daily Planet. In 1977, Pete Williams, an expert on James Joyce, suggested we gather a bunch of friends and 1 or 2 nights a month get together at my house, drink Guinness, and read Ulysses. I learned so much from those evenings. We would occasionally drink more than we would read, and he would stay overnight. He had morning classes, which meant I could sleep in a little longer. One morning, I heard a knock at the door. It was the Verizon guy who came to fix our phone. Pete answered the door. "Mr. Zulauf," the man said. "No," said Pete, "I'm his interpreter." Matty Ayres is now the department's expert on Joyce, Ulysses, and Irish literature. If you want to know anything about James Joyce, ask Matty. In fact, the CCM English and Philosophy department is overflowing with experts. If you want to know anything about Emily Dickinson, ask Marianne Garbowski. If you want to know anything about theater and film, ask Clark Gabrielson. If you want to know anything about Dante or John Donne, ask Janet Eber. If you want to know anything about Broadway, ask Bob Chiaffi. If you want to know anything about songs from 1930s movies and American popular song, ask John McHenry and he will sing. If you want to know anything about children's literature or women in literature, ask Laura Gabrielson. If you want to know anything about journalism, ask Dee Macquarie. If you want to know anything about contemporary African literature and culture, especially about Ghana and African American literature, ask John Apwa. You might want to ask him about the future, too, as he's correctly predicted how bad Superstorm Sandy, my eponymous storm, would be, and he predicted Donald Trump's election. If you want to know anything about baseball, ask our living Bill James baseball encyclopedia, Ken Scholler. If you want to know anything about playing tennis and writing novels, ask Phil Chase. And you want to know anything about horses and golf, ask Peter McGuire. These professors are faster than Siri. Pete Williams introduced me to the greatest food city in America, New Orleans, in 1977. Madeline and I have celebrated birthdays and anniversaries there at least 10 times. That introduction to regional cooking made me curious about food specialties in other cities. At a conference in San Antonio in the early 1980s, we had dinner at a steakhouse that featured Rocky Mountain oysters. I ordered them, and they were deep fried and delicious. When I got back to the office, I asked Pete if he'd ever tried them. No, he said, I didn't have the balls. In the early 80s, the college B cafeteria stopped serving ice for its soft drinks. One student wrote a letter to the Youngtown edition asking, what happened? Did they lose the recipe? I became the faculty advisor to the Promethean in those early years, after tenure, by the way. And my editor-in-chief was the blind artist Chris Delmonico. He was totally blind, but did magnificent visual drawings and paintings that he learned from an expert blind person up in Boston. Chris had talent and imagination and strong opinions about what he wanted in the magazine. I became his eyes for everything in it. The student activities budget allowed for just enough money to have the magazine printed at a print shop in Chester, but not enough to bind it. So the entire editorial board and I would go to Chester one evening after we were notified that it was ready to go, and we would assemble and staple the magazine together. Dean Dragonetti must have gotten word from above that Chris had to go because of something controversial we had published. So he called us to a big meeting in his office, and I managed to have George allow Chris to remain editor for the second year. For his last issue, he wanted to put a message in Braille on the back cover. I thought that was a beautiful idea. Chris' eloquent goodbye to CCM, until he told me what he wanted to say. Maston is a bald-headed I said, Chris, man, I got to live here. You are transferring. They would hang me from that massive outdoor sculpture. Some major American poets visited and read at CCM after Sherm disbanded the committee, and the Cultural Affairs Department under Carol Shapiro was born. Carol presented some of the finest musical talents, such as Yo-Yo Ma and Emanuel Axe. She had loads of money, and she helped me invite so many of our greatest poets. Pulitzer Prize winners, National Book Award winners, Philip Levine, Howard Nemiroff, Elizabeth Bishop, Gerald Stern, Gwendolyn Brooks, and so many others, including Allen Ginsberg, and our New Jersey genius philosopher poet, Kenneth Burke, who received the National Medal for Literature from President Reagan the week he came to lecture and read at CCM. Howard Nemiroff was here the week before he won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. I had that year's winner on campus, but he told me I could not tell anyone because it had not yet been announced. A big change came to campus when the students were no longer students, but suddenly our customers. To the complete surprise of the faculty, and without any faculty involvement, we were presented at the end of the second semester with a customer survey known as the SOR. The students were now grading the teachers. We were instructed to remain passive, pass out the forms, leave the classroom for 20 minutes, have a student collect and tally up completed and blank forms, seal the envelope, and deliver it to an administrator. Rita Licciardolo, our second English department chairperson, said, "They trust us with their minds, but not with pieces of paper." Thinking of this now, I'm reminded of a joke my dear friend Marvin Silva told me. Marvin was an actor, poet, director, producer, and American hero. He flew 35 missions over Germany in World War II in his B-17. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross from President Roosevelt. And before he died on Pearl Harbor Day in 2015, he received the Legion of Honor from French President François Hollande. Lady comes out of a restaurant and says, "Don't go in there. The food is terrible and such small portions." In those early years before my famous rolling duffel that John McKendry enjoyed stealing, I carried a briefcase. For some reason, perhaps in a hurry rushing from class to office, back to class, I usually had one clasp fastened and one unfastened. As I was on my way down the stairs, Professor McKendry noticed and said, "It's Professor Zulauf's open and shut case." Jane Derrick, formerly of the purchasing department, and Tom Byron are now Jane and Tom Byron. They met in my creative writing class in 1973. Here are a few student gems. There's so many, it's hard to choose. It's a dog-eat-dog world. The first sentence of a Comp 2 final exam answer on a question about William Faulkner's short story Barn Burning reads, "Barn burning is the story of a family on the move." Another exam answer, Oedipus is about a guy who marries his mother and has children with her. Ew. And one creative writing student among many who have had novels published was Carolyn Craig, who dedicated her first novel, Anybody But Me, this way. For Sander Zulauf, extraordinary poet and teacher, because once upon a time in a classroom far, far away, you showed me my heart and the words written there. Well, I think Dr. Smith wanted a little pedagogy in here, so here it comes. This is what I've learned about college teaching for these 44 years. 1, try to avoid saying useless, unimportant things like, okay. Make every word you say count. Number 2, a community college professor is someone who never says anything once. Number 3, prepare exam review handouts for students to complete at home before exams. 4, if you teach writing, make prolific writing and sharing as presented in Marie Ponceau and Rosemary Dean's book, Beat Not the Poor Desk, a practice at every class meeting. 5, never be condescending. You can tell yourself you know more than they do, but you may be wrong. 6, when a student answers a question in class, always ask a follow-up question, even if it's only, why do you think so? That forces deeper thinking about the answer and how they got it. Don't just say good or right or okay and move on. 7, to build involvement, have every student read aloud from paragraphs of stories or stanzas or lines of poems as often as possible. Even if they mangle the words, let it go. It will build confidence. And when they hear the words coming out of their own mouths, the impressions of what is being said might just register. Now, this is a tough one, and you might find a little controversial, but here goes. 8, devote as much energy and attention as you can to the students who want to learn and try to ignore the ones who are ignoring you doing this, or who simply want attention rather than anything else from you. Those guys will stick in your mind unfairly long after the beautiful exchanges have disappeared and continue to feed on your brain like parasites. But if you don't give them the attention they crave, and they realize the only way to get your attention is if they get involved, you just might win over those brain-eating monsters. Number 9, we touch eternity. We never know what influence we may be having. Just last week, Shelley Kurland asked if a friend of hers who was my student in Comp 1 in 1974 could get in touch with me. I said, sure. He let me know that he's now teaching English composition because he enjoyed my Comp 1 class so much. He has been assigned a Saturday Comp 1 class that meets for 3 hours, and he's asking me for help with it. I told him to get a copy of Beat Not the Poor Desk, read it, and we'll talk. Weeks before he died, we visited our retired English professor colleague, Andy Downey, at the Mary Hart Nursing Home in Succasunna. When he saw Madeline and me, he said, "What a joy." North Peterson and I decided to retire at the same time after spending so many years teaching English together. One day last fall, I dropped into his office. Contemplating retirement, he said, "Zul, they shoot horses, don't they?" Then I said, "Oh my God. Madeline's been giving me carrots and an apple for lunch every day." Clark Gabrielson is the most serious professor of speech and drama anywhere, and also perhaps the funniest man alive, who can erupt into riffs on just about anything that can make you laugh so hard your stomach hurts and you begin to cry. True comic catharsis. When I told Clark about shooting horses and my daily carrots and apple, he immediately stood up from his desk and asks, "Sandy, how many years have you worked at CCM?" And then, pretending he's me, he begins stomping his right foot 44 times. A week after I retired, I had to get some books I'd promised to give to a student into the office. I found Jim Capozzi already hard at work at my desk. Laura Gabrielson came out of her office and said to me, "What's the matter? Did you forget you don't work here anymore?" Laura, darling, you're right. I don't work here anymore. And now, those 2 poems. The first is by Howard Nemiroff and is entitled September, the First Day of School. I'm reading this because I realize that 66 of my 70 years have been spent in school. And it's from this little book, Gnomes and Occasions, which Howard signed for me, and which my son decorated when he was 3 years old. It's in 2 parts, and there are 3 stanzas in each part. 1, my child and I hold hands on the way to school. And when I leave him at the first grade door, he cries a little, but is brave. He does let go. My selfish tears remind me how I cried before that door a life ago. I may have had a hard time letting go. Each fall, the children must endure together what every child also endures alone. Learning the alphabet, the integers, 3 dozen bits and pieces of a stuff so arbitrary, so peremptory, that worlds invisible bow down before it, as in Joseph's dream. The sheaves bowed down, and then the stars bowed down before the dreaming of a little boy. That dream got him such hatred of his brothers as cost the greater part of life to mend. And yet, great kindness came of it in the end. 2, a school is where they grind the grain of thought and grind the children who must mind the thought. It may be those 2 grindings are but one, as from the alphabet comes Shakespeare's plays, as from the integers comes Euler's law, as from the whole inseparably the lives, the shrunken lives that have not been set free by law or by poetic fantasy, but may they be? My child has disappeared behind the schoolroom door. And should I live to see his coming forth a life away, I know my hope, but do not know its form, nor hope to know it. May the fathers and mothers he finds among his teachers have a care of him more than his father could. How that will look, I do not know. I do not need to know. Even our tears belong to ritual. But may great kindness come of it in the end. And here's a poem that's 30 years old now. It's an original. Where raptors soar the mountain o'er, let us resolve with might to seek and find with open minds the love of truth and light. Sapere aude, to all the world we show that CCM, women and men, will ever dare to know. God bless you all for sharing these moments with me, and God bless the County College of Morris. Oh, wow.